Thank you so much. It is truly an honor we have been able to hear your words. Do any of the panelists want to open the discussion in response?
I will. My name is Tracy. I'm from Cattaraugus. My grandmother was Edna Gordon, and she was very involved in her community. She wrote many books of poetry, and she was very involved in the community. Actually, she spoke in many colleges and many places for the Native people. And growing up as a kid, I didn't pay much attention to it, but now I see, and I see myself becoming more her than anybody. Um, I have been so inspired in this whole topic, and all of the words I hear from all the women here have been so inspiring. And this is something, this was a goal of mine for a long time because I was sick in the alcohol disease. And I've come so far and made so many steps. And I'm proud of myself for that. And I want to get back into my community and help, um, educate in everything, in every way, shape, and form, and nutrition as well. But I see the problems. I see what's going on, and it's inspired me to become an alcohol and drug counselor, because that's one of the topics that I think is really important for these reservations and these people, the men and women included. And it's been a disease in my family for generations. So, and a lot of violence comes out of that. These people are lost. They're numb. They don't feel nothing. They don't care, and that's the point. They're raising kids that don't care because their parents don't care. So you're right. We need to give in. Women need to get involved and get back into that. Get the love and the education of how we need to respect the earth and go through all of the education of how we lived, how our people lived, how our ancestors lived. My grandparents were farmers, so we grew food. I've always grown food too. It's been a thing all my life. So yeah, very inspirational. I thank all of you who have talked. That I'm getting educated, and I can't wait to get back to my people. We've actually created a new group called Indigenous Peoples Center here in Rochester, New York. And I've got my feet full in, and I'm taking notes, and I'm going to report. And I want to get back to my reservation and the Allegheny Reservation where the rest of my family is, and get on the topic. Get in there and get involved and inspire maybe my family, other family members to lead the right way. They've changed to Catholicism, and maybe they can turn back and look at the way their parents were raised or their grandparents were raised, because I know I wasn't raised with a cell phone in my hand or television all the time. I remember when television was black and white, if you had one, So, and we played outside. We got dirty. So we also need to incorporate that in our people's lives and our children's lives, having them grow with the earth in their toes and the wind in their hair, to respect the fire that we keep burning for funerals and such ceremonies. So thank you for letting me speak. Thank you for being an inspiration to me.
Thank you.
Or I should say Yahweh.
Yahweh. We have a couple questions. One is towards something that Mama Bear brought up, which is, are there any organizations currently working toward the mass rejection of U.S. citizenship?
No. No, not that I'm aware of. But We can certainly start one here today. Yeah, I think it's a concept that's hard for people to wrap their mind around it. And in Seneca Falls, I remember the year when Trump got in, and everybody, it felt so apocalyptic, and people of color and women, if everybody remembers the marches, you know, everybody was just so upset. And I think more the feeling of fright, you know, people were just not knowing what was gonna happen under his leadership. And you know, the mood was so heavy at Seneca Falls that year, and I was one of the speakers along with Michelle, and I didn't know why I said that. It just fell out of the sky. And you know, when you're given a system that it's either you go left or you go right, and there's no middle, like you know, what are people left to choose? But you know, it's a system that's eventually going to fall anyways. It's heading for collapse anyways. So if you're looking for a model for something that's a little bit different, you can look to your indigenous societies to see what we've already built here. There's still something wonderful. And I believe that, and you know, one of the things that I often also say, on top of saying rescind your US citizenship, is that, you know, now is a time for indigenous people to take the United States and Canada, New Zealand and Australia, wherever indigenous people are, to take their countries to a world court for premeditated genocide, because written right in their legislative policies is on termination policy to get rid of us. It's still on the books. It's still written in the laws. Like how come people don't know that? There's still bounties on Indian heads. You can still get $5 for an Indian scalp. The laws were never removed. They're still on the law books. So to me, you know, we have to rescind Manifest Destiny. We gotta, there's just so much work that needs to be done. But, you know, my good friend Sally Roche Wagner is probably the only white woman who said she's more than willing to rescind her US citizenship. And so it'll be a wait and see to see if she really follows through on that. But yeah, the system is falling anyway, so might as well jump ship and jump into our canoe before it totally sinks. Just saying. Michelle, I'm sure you have something to say to that.
We do have another question, which I might move on to, and maybe people could answer both of them as they respond. The next question is, how can we best raise awareness, especially with the start of Native American Heritage Month?
So I have an answer. I'm not entirely sure if it was just last year or if it's something that's put into place every year. But I know that alongside Native American Heritage Month, Trump also created Founders Month, I believe it's called. And I'm not sure if it was just the one time or if it's meant to play out every year. But last year when that came up, I made it a point to put out information on Rematriation Magazine in regard to that history. I actually thanked Trump in the post for creating that sense of awareness, to bring awareness to the founders, because what most people don't realize is that the US Constitution and the form of government that the United States has is based on our Haudenosaunee governance. And so to me, that was the perfect opportunity to raise awareness for Americans about the true source of their government. And from that comes all sorts of other issues that can be raised, including this history that we're talking about today. But I think it's really important for people to realize that, when you talk about the formation of this government and talk about the founding fathers, many people don't see that these individuals lived in a very indigenous world. and they had lots of interactions and transactions and being completely immersed and surrounded by indigenous cultures that existed here and were here prior to, you know, the colonies, you know, forming and all this early settlement. So I think that that's one important thing to really look at, especially if there's this push again, or if it's part of, you know, legislation or whatever, to have this Founders Month. I think that that's really key to looking at that history. So I don't think Trump was expecting that when he created that initiative, but I think it's important to raise that awareness. So I think in addition to that, raising the awareness of what we're talking about today, I think is really critical. For whatever reason, the Trump administration has taken an interest in missing and murdered Indigenous women more recently. So I consider that as something that is positive and is something definitely worth talking about. But what I think is essential to understanding is the history, because like I said earlier, until we really truly know the history, collectively, that this country knows the history, that it's bound to continue to repeat the same patterns that it has perpetuated throughout the years, which has continued to invisibilize and silence Indigenous voice.
Thank you so much. That was a great answer. I'd love to hear from our other panelists about this important question of raising awareness. Janelle.
Yes, thank you. And I think that that's a great question. And so there's multiple ways for you to bring awareness. And so, you know, a lot of times I think, you know, as for marketing things, right, when we make t-shirts or when we have visibility written all over us and we're walking around saying, this is what I support, or when you're buying earrings or jewelry from an Indigenous woman who's using that as an economic way to support her children and her family, those are ways to help out. I think there's a lot of great pieces around. I don't celebrate, obviously, Thanksgiving or any of those things. So what I do is I make it a point to have conversations with my children about why I choose not to make a dinner, or why I choose not to continue these foreign traditions that don't acknowledge us. And so trying to unlearn some of that cultural behavior that just has been taken for what it is, and the truth behind it isn't understood. So even if you're trying to donate money, right, so you have 7 dancers, you can look up, I'm sure you could get something from your like from your taxes, right, to claim that on there. So, you know, whether it's your time, conversations with your children, but how you raise your family, how do you interact with those relationships with your friends, and be like, hey, you know, I was listening to about Indigenous, did you hear about that? Right. So I think all of that is extremely important, whether it comes to, you know, the dollar bills, or whether it comes down to a good conversation about the, you know, maybe somewhere we do have an obligation in this, because I feel it. You know, do you feel that? So you know, I think there's lots of ways to raise awareness and sharing that content amongst, you know, your networks and your peers, because you have people that you influence on the daily. And so any kind of time and any kind of attention and highlighting us in that way. And, you know, I just think it's really, you know, not interesting, but it's kind of something else, because we are literally the witness to the murder. We are the witness to the murder. So it is, you know, of benefit to the person who's trying to extinguish us, that there's no witness to this murder, because if there's no witness, then you can't prosecute us. There's nobody there to testify that this is what's really happened. And I think it's also really important to say that those people are not going to give you the education that you need to overthrow them. And the people that hold the education that you need to overthrow them lies within the original stewards of the land and the people that hold the longest memory of it. So that this living memory is still within us. That's why it's extremely important, like my sister mentioned earlier, the importance of sobriety, the importance of having a healthy family, the importance of having healthy relationships, because it's within those places that we wake up to our power. And any abusive perpetrator, anybody who's exerting that much time and effort for power and control does not want you to know your power. It doesn't want you to know that you have the right, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, to decide for yourself what you believe and what you're about and what's for the greater good of you and your family. So when we talk about sovereignty, when we talk about liberty and justice, we have to think outside of the box that has always tried to put us in. And it is only within that means of freedom and creativity and thinking are we really going to be able to create a system that works for all of us, because initially the law of the land here was full of peace, it was full of power, and it was full of a good message and the greater good for the people. So I hope that brings a little bit of thought and a little bit of creativity to your thinking. But I'm offering that in different ways so that you can decide for yourself. And if it does mean going to the front lines, if it does mean taking a trip out to Nova School, you do it. You get on that plane, you show up, you get to those front lines. But there's so many ways, both small and great, that you can show up, and all of it's necessary. And thank you for posting that question, because it is important. And I appreciate being able to offer feedback on that.
Thank
And I
you.
wanted to add to Janelle too, because I remember in one of her speeches that it's the places where we as Indigenous people are not invited to is where you can help the most. Use your voice, get out there and say it, because you are now aware of the problem. So it should be up to you to bring it up to the people that we don't get the opportunity to converse with. So make it your own personal mission to raise the voices. Janelle speaks so great because she has so many of the powerful people behind her telling her what to say, and it comes out and it's awesome. And that is actually one of the things that she said in the past. So I just wanted to reiterate that for her.
Thank you all so much. I just want to put in a small plug. I forgot to announce that this is the Susan B. Anthony Center at the University of Rochester that's hosting this, and we are going to be posting information on our Twitter feed and other social media for Native American Heritage Month. So that's one starting place for people who are looking to amplify. But I think more important is looking at the voices and the social media presence of these Haudenosaunee leaders and other Indigenous leaders, and to see if you can amplify that message and broadcast it. We have some other questions and an interesting discussion going on in the chat about different ways that people can support Indigenous women. Looking for the next question. Are there films and that you feel are important to share, or resources?
I'd like to mention one, Catherine. I was on a Zoom yesterday with Steve Newcomb, and he's got a film out that's called The Doctrine of Domination, which addresses the Papables, Manifest Destiny, and the doctrines of discovery. And he has done a really good job bringing this particular piece of legislative or Christian law to light, which is at the very root of what is wrong, and is at the very root of the disease that's been unleashed on this hemisphere. But there's another thing that I also want to say I'm going to sideline the topic here, Catherine, but I just want to talk a little bit about white privilege and also about white guilt. And it's, you know, because I have to acknowledge somewhere in my ancestry too is also European ancestry. And, you know, every time I talk, I'm always aware that we have non-native people in the audience. And I can't even begin to imagine what that feels like to be part of a race or an ethnicity that has caused so much devastation in the world. And, you know, I don't want you to think that we're putting blame on anybody, because what happened to us also happened to you. And, you know, part of being part of a race that, and a religion that has created an illegitimate assumption of authority and superiority over the rest of the world, has to be unveiled and talked about. And, you know, often when we have these talks, people will say this, well, what can we do to change it? Well, you know, my only thing that I often come back with is truth. Tell the truth. And teach your children the truth. It's simple as that. And, you know, even if you want to step it up a little bit, align yourself with us, and let's return this entire planet to a place of humanity, and to a place of not domination, but of cooperation and celebration of each other's differences and different skin colors. And you know, the U.S. judicial system, like Michelle explained so well, because she's so smart, that these are laws that still are applied today when we try and get back our land or our sacred sites. These are still laws that incarcerate our people and still murder our women and take our children away and put them in cages, because our relatives down south are indigenous too. So at whatever cost, it's for the profit and the greed of the few elite. So at the end of the day, it's not to make anybody feel like they need to defend white privilege or have any kind of white guilt. All I ask is that you own it. And we would love you anyways. And we would still help you anyways. And I think there's no greater truth to a person's character than to ask for forgiveness and to give forgiveness. And so as humanity moves forward and recognizes we're all in a peril with the climate change, now more than ever, we need those fearless ones, those courageous ones, to stand at the threshold of this incredible change that's barreling toward us. And we got to stand ready to usher in this new time of enlightenment, consciousness, truth. And I always come back to that, is to own our own truths. And I think that's part of the enema that human consciousness needs. You know, we really got to flush that shit out. All that, sorry, but you know, we really got to quit being constipated in our minds and quit being constipated in our character, and standing firm on false truths. And I think there has to be a mass exodus out of the system, because it's killing us. It's killing our planet. And if we need to do anything, we need to unite in a common thought and a common movement to say we're not going to tolerate this no more. And women are absolutely, like our elder said, is going to lead the charge. And I'm really grateful for this day and this opportunity and for the questions being asked. I forgot what the question was already, but I just wanted to pipe in there and, say that me and my sisters are not here to offend, but we are here for the truth. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I will speak for myself. I am here to hear the truth, and I'm grateful for the chance to broadcast the truth. We have about 3 minutes left, so I would like to look to our presenters, including the elder who is here with us, Great Grandmother Mary Lyons, and see if you have a few words to say in closing.
I'm doing this on a little bitty tiny phone here, and my fingers, I'm punching all these buttons, and I'm trying to get dressed for us to some call it protest, we call it protect, and we're going to lead women's circles and this stuff to pray on the lands. And in closing of often what us elders speak of, we speak really not to the ears of the humans, but to Mother Earth. When you feel her, you feel the ground, you feel the trees, you feel the air, and you give gratitude. You can't give gratitude to another human being. You have to give gratitude to what is sustaining life. You see, people forget that. People forget that today's a gift. This breath is a gift. And we're hollow bones. And the messages that arise and the passion that comes forward is from our ancestors. They arise and they waken us. So when we say no more, we mean no more in a manner of we don't need to be living in confusion. We need to restore the balance of who we are as these students that came here as individuals. We can't play into other little groups or sections in this stuff. You have to walk and stand in your own space, because Creator and our ancestors never made us or gave us that grandiose privilege to be in somebody else's space, because that's an abuse of time while you're here being a caretaker. But when you do walk through life, and when you turn around and look to see who followed in your footprints, they'll either make you smile or they'll make you weep. Because ancestors always taught we are nothing but mirrors of who we are as students. So if we teach the negative, we will be surrounded by the negative. If we humble ourselves to the goodness, we will walk with millions. Millions. There might be only 3 as we go to prayer, but we have to remember all the ancestors in us, around us, and all that has been before us. So I champion what we do today. And I also encourage each one of you. We've got good movies out. People ask us questions about what happens. But come along for humanity's sake. Bring your organizations together. Talk to some of these ladies. Start creating the documentaries of why the indigenous people of these lands, Canada, United States, they call it, South America, all the Americas, all the lands. Ask them why we are in it, and we will win it, because you got to remember, we will make it through whatever, because We are the seeds of this land. Remember, just remember to be a really, really good visitor. Because if I enter, or when I enter your lands, I pay homage the same way. I sit and listen and support. So to you all, listen, anytime you see what you're seeing here, jump on, because these are the positives of Facebook. These women and men, they champion because they want harmony. They want that balance back within humanity. So let's move it in a good way. And yes, the sadness as it does cost money. But help those ones in the front lines. You know, the ones in the front lines get beat up so bad and they're criticized. But without those frontline people, we wouldn't be having this conversation, because we do have to support the warriors. We're all warriors, but sometimes those are the difficult warriors that will surrender themselves before their time. So I want to say miigwech, because I feel you all are warriors today. And stay healthy, stay happy, stay in your space, and just smile, because smiling is the best medicine ever. So miigwech.
Thank you. Thank you for your wisdom and your blessings. And we are a little bit over time. I'm beyond honored to have been part of listening to your sharings and your tellings. And I say thank you, Noe, to all of the powerful, strong women who have presented here today. And I hope we all take that message to heart. Thank you so much.